What is up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of The Girl Who Talks Sports, a podcast where we talk sports and other girly things. I am Sam Cardona, and thank you guys so much for listening this week. So I am very excited to give you guys this episode this week. We spoke with Sideline Reporter and broadcaster from CBS Sports and FS1, Marisa Pilla. She is a fantastic human being. She was so nice to talk to, so wonderful, so inspiring. I'm so excited to give you guys this interview. But first, we must go through the motions as we normally do. So first things first, guys, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on all podcasting platforms, wherever it is that you get podcasts from. Subscribe to The Girl Who Talks Sports and leave a review, especially on Apple Podcasts. That's awesome. Secondly, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Girl Who Talks Sports. Subscribe, like this video if you're watching on the YouTube channel, comment, turn on little notifications to make sure you get notified every time I upload a new video, all that jazz. And finally, don't forget to follow us on social media. TGWTS Podcast on Twitter, The Girl Who Talks Sports on Instagram and TikTok. Make sure you check that out, please. All right, so that is everything, and I have a bit of like a little, not announcement, more just like a forewarning situation. For the next 2 weeks, I will be away on vacation, so there will be no new episode of The Girl Who Talks Sports. At the end of this interview with Marisa, I say I'll see you guys all next week. That is not the case. I will not be seeing you guys next week. I will be away. On Martha's Vineyard, I actually am wearing my Vineyard, like, cute little white cropped t-shirt that I bought there last year. So yeah, so we will not be having a new episode until June 23rd, I believe is the next Wednesday a new episode will be back. So, quick vacation time, I need it, I need to get tan. When we come back, my complexion is going to be completely different, okay? This is not a drill, this is not a joke, I need the sun. I was in the sun yesterday, this past Memorial Day weekend. I hope everyone enjoyed their Memorial Day weekend. I went outside, got a little bit of a base, but not too much. I mean, I know, like, my shirt is white, and, like, I'm not paper white, but trust me, I'm usually a little bit darker than I am now. Working from home is a little weird because I usually am like outside and like inside and like all this stuff, but in this case, I don't go outside really anymore. So without dragging on, I had to stop myself there. Without dragging on much longer, I have one story that I just want to talk to you guys about before we get into our interview with Marisa. And it's kind of, not normally the sport I discuss, but the entirety of the topic is very important to me. So I'm sure many of you guys have heard about Naomi Osaka, tennis player, very young, very talented. She recently had said that she was not going to be speaking to the media at the French Open because of her social anxiety, and she was like, every once in a while I just don't want to talk to the media. I will be participating though, yada, yada, yada. Then eventually it came to the point where she is not going to be competing at all. Now, what I'm going to do first before I get into everything is kind of read in full what she said so that everyone has the same information that I do. So she posted first to say, "Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. I'm writing this to say I'm not going to do any press during Roland Garros. I've often felt that people have no regard for athletes' mental health, and this rings very true whenever I see a press conference or partake in one. We're often sat there and asked questions that we've been asked multiple times before, or asked questions that bring doubt into our minds, and I'm just not going to subject myself to people that doubt me. I've watched many clips of athletes breaking down after a loss in the press room, and I know you have as well. I believe the whole situation is kicking a person while they're down, and I don't understand the reasoning behind it. Me not doing press is nothing personal to the tournament. A couple journalists have interviewed me since I was young, and I have a friendly relationship with most of them. However, If the organizations think that they can just keep saying, do press or you're going to be fined, and continue to ignore the mental health of the athletes that are the centerpiece of their cooperation, then I just gotta laugh. Anyways, I hope this is a considerable amount that I get fined for this will go towards a mental health charity XOXO. So obviously she puts it out there. She explains why she won't be doing press during Roland Garros. And it's because she doesn't want to be harassed by the media, basically. And I obviously have never been a professional athlete. I don't know what that pressure is like, but I could only imagine what it feels like to go through something like that. So when she came out and said that, I was like, okay, cool. Like, do you, Naomi? You are fantastic. And, whatever. Do you, girl. Then she posts another, note app post on Twitter, which says this: "Hey everyone, this isn't a situation I ever imagined or intended when I posted a few days ago. I think now the best thing for the tournament, the other players, and my well-being is that I withdraw so that everyone can go back to focusing on the tennis going on in Paris. I never wanted to be a distraction. I accept that my timing was not ideal and my message could have been clearer. More importantly, I would never trivialize mental health or use the term lightly. The truth is that I have suffered long bouts of depression since the US Open in 2018, and I have had a really hard time coping with that. Anyone that knows me knows I'm introverted, and anyone that has seen me at the tournaments will notice that I am often wearing headphones as that helps dull my social anxiety. Though the tennis press has always been kind to me, and I want to apologize especially to all those cool journalists who I may have hurt, I am not a natural public speaker and get huge waves of anxiety before I speak to the world's media. I get really nervous and find it stressful to always try to engage and give you the best answers that I can. So, here in Paris, I was already feeling vulnerable and anxious, so I thought it was better to exercise self-care and skip the press conferences. I announce it preemptively because I do feel like the rules are quite outdated in parts, and I wanted to highlight that. I wrote privately to the tournament, apologizing and saying that I would be more than happy to speak with them after the tournament, as the slams are intense. I'm going to take some time away from the court now, but when the time is right, I really want to work with the tour to discuss the ways that we can make things better for the players, press, and fans. Anyways, I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I love you guys, and I'll see you when I see you." So, literally, what happened is tennis bullied Naomi Osaka into not competing in the sport that she competes in. It's very sad because I know myself included and a lot of people that I'm close with suffer from mental health, suffer from anxiety, depression. It is what it is. But the fact that she expressed why she won't be talking to the media is because of her mental health. It just is really upsetting that it was handled in this way. I really think that people took it out of context when they were like, "Oh, well, it's in your contract. It's in your contract to talk to the media. It's blah, blah, blah." Like, let me just say really quick, nobody was saying any of this stuff about Marshawn Lynch when he didn't want to talk to the media and he showed up just to say, "I'm just here so I don't get fined." Everyone just thought that was funny, but he just didn't want to talk to media. He didn't have a, not an excuse, but he didn't have a reason to say, "I don't want to talk to the media because it's, my mental health and blah, blah, blah." The second that she brought mental health into the mix, everybody is all of a sudden all over her for no reason, which is so upsetting. So the French Open also decided to fine Naomi Osaka $15,000 because she wouldn't speak to the media. So obviously the price of wanting to take care of yourself mentally is $15,000 to the French Open. I wanted to just talk about this really quick because it's really upsetting. And it's not like she's like, "I'm never talking to the press ever again. You will never hear from me." That's obviously not what she was saying. She was in a different country, which is at this point in time with COVID and everything, very stressful. She has to talk to a bunch of people. She's talking to the world. Tennis is not just a United States sport, obviously. It is worldwide. So she's got to talk to so many people. The media is a harsh place and a harsh, kind of force to be reckoned with. And not to say that we don't need media, because we absolutely do, but like she was saying, sometimes they hound you and sometimes you don't want to answer their questions, or sometimes you've answered these questions so many times already. So I understand her struggle, and I understand why she didn't want to speak to the media in the first place, and the fact that now she's just not competing at all just really, I don't know, it just rubs me the wrong way. So, if you guys feel differently, that's fine. I'm open to having a discussion with people about this, but I think that mental health is very important, especially for athletes, especially young athletes like Naomi Osaka. You don't want to deal with this type of stuff, especially at a very young age for so long. So I hope that things get kind of smoothed over. I hope that they can take this situation, and Naomi and tennis as a whole can kind of bring this into the light and say, like, this is what needs to be done. Because people will say all the time, like, mental health is important, mental health is important. And the second someone tries to do something to benefit their mental health, they're like, oh, well, you can't do that. Like, it just is, it's tough. It's really tough and really annoying. So, nonetheless, I would love to hear other people's thoughts on this. Don't hesitate to, start a debate with me. I have no problem with that. I'd really actually want to hear the other side of things, because I don't understand the other side. So, if you guys feel like she should be doing this or she should be doing something different, let me know. I'm totally fine with that. So, once again, before we get into our interview with Marisa, there will be no new episodes for the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks, people, not 1 week, 2 weeks. So June 23rd, we will be back. And I know at the end of this interview, I say I will see you guys next week, but that is not the case. So, everyone, without further ado, we are going to get into our interview with Marisa Pilla, sports broadcaster, sideline reporter of CBS Sports and FS1. Okay, everyone, I'm so excited to introduce our guest for this week. We have Marisa Pilla. She is a full-blown sports broadcaster. Our first interview with like a actual employed sports broadcaster from CBS Sports, FS1. She covers women's soccer. She's going to be on the Olympics this year, which we are going to go over. Marisa, thank you so much for joining me this week.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and I'm so excited to talk to you about how you got into everything and, your journey so far in the sports world. But before we start, kind of introduce yourself, what exactly do you do for a living, and, what is it all about?
Yeah, my name's Marisa. I am the head sideline reporter for the NWSL on CBS Sports. I'm also a sideline reporter for MLS on FS1. So yeah, my life pretty much revolves around the months of March through November, and I'm on the road pretty much every weekend, covering the game of the week, either for CBS or Fox Sports. And I mean, I just love my job. I mean, I think we all get into this industry because we're fans to first and foremost, and we have such a passion, and to be able to do that for a job too is something I'm super grateful about.
That's awesome. I love that. And I'm so excited to kind of hear about your journey getting into sports broadcasting. So, where did it start? What made you decide I want to do sports for a living, and what has been kind of your process so far?
Yeah, it really started when I was a kid, when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. I was always kind of a tomboy growing up. I played a lot of sports. My dad immigrated from Italy, and so soccer was basically, it was a given. You had to like soccer. You had to watch it and play it and live it and everything. And then really it was like the '99 Women's World Cup. I was about 8 years old. And when that happened, and when Brandy Chastain scored that goal, and it kind of ignited something within me that I had always liked sports up until that point, but I realized women could be figures in the sports world. And that's really what inspired me, those 99ers. And I was always really active. I played a ton of sports growing up. I didn't grow up to be Julie Foudy or Brandy Chastain on the field, but I figured I can probably talk about them. So I knew in high school I loved English, I liked writing, I liked storytelling, and I had a teacher who kind of told me all that really goes into journalism and broadcasting. So I knew from the get-go when I applied to journalism schools that I wanted to do sports. I didn't want to talk about the water main break that happened down the street or,
Right.
all the terrible things that the news unfortunately has to cover. I wanted to talk
Right.
about the fun stuff. I want to talk about sports. And that's what led me to the University of Maryland. And yeah, it's just been a grind since then, but I've really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I totally feel that, sports are kind of like an outlet for people and like a way to escape almost from certain things. So that I totally understand that. But so you did play soccer growing up?
I did. I played soccer, basketball, volleyball,
Oh, wow.
softball. I played a lot of stuff. And in my mind, I'm still like super athletic, but I haven't tested that physically out somewhere. I was in a volleyball league a couple years ago and I was like, wow, like I am way too competitive. I am that person. And I have to take a step back.
That's so funny because I totally feel the same way. After playing sports in high school, all of a sudden you're like, yeah, no, I could still do that. And
Yeah.
I played softball and I'm like, I don't even know if I could swing a bat.
Yeah. You're like, I don't know if I can make contact. In my mind, I do, but like physically, I don't know if the connection's there still.
So what position did you play in soccer?
So I was more of a defensive player. So I either played like defensive midfield or I played like center back. I dabbled in the goalkeeping realm for a little bit because I was very tall at a young age. So they threw me in net. I actually really enjoyed it. But yeah, my dad was very adamant. He came from, midfielders are, they're the backbone of the team. He wanted me to be a midfielder. I'm like, I can't run that long, Dad. Please acknowledge my shortcomings. So yeah.
That's very true. I played soccer when I was in like elementary school and I was a forward. And even that,
Yeah.
I was like, this is way too much running.
Yeah, it's a lot. So I mean, when I watch these men and women and players out there in the Houston and Orlando humidity, and I'm sweating my makeup off, I'm like, I don't know how they're doing this. So I just give them so many props and credit like to their craft because it's a tough sport to play. I think endurance wise, it has to be the hardest. What it demands of you physically. So yeah, I'm glad I'm on the sidelines talking about it instead of making a fool of myself trying to do it.
Absolutely. So I kind of want to get into your journey so far as a woman in sports. And I think that that's something I really like to highlight a lot on my podcast is, there's so many different women in the sports field right now, and everybody kind of has their own story. So, as a woman in sports, what has been your experience so far? Do you feel like, you have been someone that has, kind of had to push your way through to make it to where you are? Do you feel like people have been supportive of you?
Yeah, I would say a little bit of both. I've had so much support in my life, not only from family and friends, but teachers and mentors in this industry, both men and women. So I've had a lot of support, but you always face a little bit of resistance, maybe. Like for example, when I was in college, I was set on being a sports reporter. I didn't care what anybody said. That was my goal. And there was a career fair at my school, and I went to go talk to different news stations that were having internships in the sports department. And my friend, who happened to be a guy, told me, "Oh, this one news station has sports internships. You should go talk to them." So I went and talked to him. And I sat down, and the first thing he said is, "This is a sports internship. Do you like sports?" And I was like looking around. I'm like, "Are you talking to me?" The person who voluntarily sat down at a sports department desk. And I just kind of looked at him and, you're young and you're just like, well, yeah, I'm studying sports journalism. And I walked away thinking like, did he say that to my friend Matt? Like, did he ask Matt if he likes sports? And I get that still every now and then of, oh, you're in sports. Are you a fan of sports? Like, no, I got into this crazy competitive industry
Right.
for shits and giggles, just to see how it go. I don't even like it. Like, of course I like sports. So yeah. I think kind of that assumption is a little bit going away just because there are so many women in sports. You can turn on any channel right now and see at least one woman on every show. So it's more so becoming the norm, which I'm really looking forward to, because sometimes when you say like women in sports, you're still excluding us from the
Absolutely.
majority and the norm. So the more it's just like, yeah, it's, Sage Steele on Sports Center. She's great. It's not that she's a great woman. She's just great. She's fantastic. So I think more and more visibility of that, and just, I think we've both kind of grown up in a generation where we've seen women on TV.
Yeah.
And it's women that we've seen on TV. Maybe they didn't have women to look up to and see themselves, but we've had that. So that's something too that I'm super grateful about.
Yeah, absolutely. More and more women are coming into this industry. And, I'm really lucky to have grown up in this kind of, you know, ESPN, Sports Center, even on NFL Network and things like that. Like, there are women here. There are women that are doing the same thing as a man. And like you said, saying women in sports is kind of like, well, they're just people in sports.
Yeah.
Everybody is doing the same thing. There's no separation here.
Right.
But I absolutely feel like that is also important, especially in soccer, especially in women's soccer. There was that whole debacle that happened with, the pay and everything like that. And so with the women's soccer team being so good that they are, I mean, they are literally the champions of the world. They are one of the best soccer teams, I feel like, and they are the most entertaining to watch. So now you're going to be covering sidelines for the Olympics this year for Tokyo, which is fantastic, and that's amazing and so exciting. So what has kind of been your, how did you receive that news?
Well, I actually received it last March. I always say it's the day before the world shut down. I received it like maybe March 13th, like right before we knew how bad things were getting. And I had just come back from a trip to Portland. I was in New Jersey, like I was doing my regular, thing.
Right.
And I got the news and I was just, it's literally a dream come true. The Olympics have always been an event that is so emotional to me. I cry at every medaling ceremony. Like I am just a mess. Just because you can feel the hard work come to a head, and just to be the best in the world and the sacrifice and everything. I'm going to make myself cry thinking about it, but it was just such a goal of mine to be able to cover the Olympics. And I was just so excited. And then as I saw what was happening within the world, it was just like, okay, this isn't going to be my summer. But fortunately, what happened for me was the NWSL went into a bubble in Utah, and I was able to go for a month. And that kind of prepped me for what it's like to be at an Olympic event, because I was just there for a whole month and covering the teams, and I got used to that quick turnaround. But the news was finally announced officially a couple weeks ago, and it was exciting because it was like I got to relive that moment all over again of like, I'm going to the Olympics. That's kind of crazy. Yeah.
That's so exciting. And you're going to be doing sideline for women's soccer, correct?
I'll be covering the U.S. women's national team and the gold medal game on NBC Sports with Arlo White and Julie Foudy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? Did I win a contest? Like, I feel like this isn't real life. But I'm just so excited. And I mean, as you said, like the U.S. women's national team has just raise the pedigree of greatness every single time they take the field, and it's really an honor to cover them and to be able to follow their journey.
Absolutely. And with the Olympics kind of being, obviously there's all this stuff still going on, all the stuff happening last year. You've waited so long for this. What are you kind of most excited for when you're going to go to Tokyo for the Olympics?
I don't know. I think my mind has just gone numb to it, and I'm like, it's happening, and like we're doing this, and I'm getting all my paperwork done and all that. I think what I'm most excited about is just to see how it works on the inside and what it's really like, because I can't imagine the pressure of being, especially on the US team, where it's gold medal or bust, and it's always that high stakes. But these women, these athletes, like they welcome that pressure with open arms, and it's going to be really interesting for me to see that in action and to see that on off game days, and really just see the area of Tokyo. It's a place I've never been able to go to on my own, and I'm so grateful that I get to see Tokyo and be there and work alongside of Arlo White, who's amazing, and Julie Foudy, who literally I had her posters on my wall as a kid. So I think it's just everything. I think I'm excited just to see the Olympics. To me are really the epitome of how sports bring us together. We see that on a daily stage in the States with everything, all the sports we have on TV, but Olympics really are such a great unifier. And just to kind of be a small, teeny tiny part of that is going to be really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the Olympics are the entire world. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just a country or one place. This is, you have reached the peak. This is the most exciting part. And I've never obviously done like broadcasting or anything for the Olympics, but I worked to the Olympics in wardrobe. And
Oh, wow.
even just being in that atmosphere, not even in Rio or Pyeongchang, I was in Connecticut. And even there, I was like, it was just nonstop for an
The
entire
energy.
month.
Yeah.
And it is intense. It's really crazy. So I can't even imagine what it's going to be like being in the actual, like, basically the bubble of the Olympics. It's going to be crazy. And that's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm crazy excited about it.
Yeah. And I can't wait to watch the women's soccer games. Cause like, I'm definitely going to be keeping a lookout for you. That's going to be so cool.
Yeah.
But, so you also host a podcast called Pilla Talk.
Yes.
Obviously based off of your last name. When did you start it? And what was your thought process like? I'm gonna do this podcast.
So I started, I want to say last fall. And really it's always been kind of like an idea, like nagging at the back of my head. I'm sure you've had those ideas where you're like, should I do this? And
yeah,
I've talked myself in and out of it like several times. And it really just came up that as I love being a sideline reporter, I love being in the action. I love telling you what you can't see or hear, and I have all the information, and I can share it with you. And but the parameters with a sideline reporter is I maybe get 10 to 15 seconds to tell you what I know, and it's really good stuff. But I know a lot of other cool stuff, and I've met a lot of really interesting people. And the podcast was a way to kind of talk more, to be honest, because I like talking. I think we all do if we get into this business.
yes.
And I wanted to talk to more people and share their stories and really dive into different topics. I've talked about how injuries can derail a career, the mental health effects of retirement and not being an athlete anymore. We've talked about a ton of different stuff. So it's really great. I get to interview a ton of people that I know, some people that I'm meeting for the first time. And it's just been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I know you've had a lot of people on. Who are some of the people that you've interviewed on your podcast?
Well, my first guest was Carly Lloyd, and I just kind of threw that out there and was like, hey, I got a yes.
Yeah.
I'm doing this podcast. And she was great. Because it was interesting to talk with her at that moment in her life, because she was just coming off an injury. She didn't play last year. And she told me, she's like, it was really the first time in her life that she can remember, maybe since she was a child, that she had free time, that she had time to be with her family. And you don't think about that with these athletes, that like their life is so regimented and their life is so cyclical, and it just revolves around the next thing and the next thing. And she's like, this is the first time since maybe I was like 10 years old that I got to spend time with my family. Especially soccer, it's year round. You always got something going up. So I spoke to her. I spoke to Heather O'Reilly. I caught up with the U.S. women's national team coach, Vlatko Andonovski. I've talked to Brian Westbrook, if there's any Eagles fans listening. Brian Westbrook. I've talked to Dr. J, which was crazy. Arlo White. I've talked to a lot of great people, and that's the thing. Everyone, whether their names are more recognizable or not, everyone has such a great take on everything, because everybody has a different perspective, and I love being able to kind of bring that out of people.
Absolutely. That's incredible. And I'm sure that I feel like I'm getting like just star treatment right now, just talking to you. So like, talking to all these people and, getting that kind of, just conversation going and just talking to these people is really exciting. I'm curious, what other sports do you watch, and like, what are your teams?
Oh man, I feel like I'm always watching stuff, and sometimes my husband's like, do we have to watch this? I'm like, oh, I just really want to see it. I watch a ton of soccer,
right?
Always, not even just because it's my job, because I just love it. I love even just having it on in the background. So I watch a ton of soccer. I am addicted to the NFL. I am a Philadelphia Eagle diehard fan. I bleed green, all that. I ran out on Broad Street when they won the Super Bowl. It was like the best day of my life.
Yeah.
And I got married that same year, and I still was like, I think the Super Bowl was better. Um, but growing up in Philadelphia, it's such a sports town, and it's so just ingrained in you at a young age that like, oh, like these are your seasons. It's Eagles season, and then it's Sixers Flyers season, and then it's Phillies season. And it's not like fall, winter, spring, summer. Like you go by the sports team season. So I mean, I'm a Philly diehard through and through. I went to the University of Maryland, so I try to keep track on everything they did. The men just had a heartbreaking loss in the lacrosse championship. But yeah, I pretty much watch it all. Mostly, I would say top three are soccer, NFL, and NBA. I'm always following.
Yeah, I mean, you can see behind me, I'm a Giants fan, but one of my best friends is an Eagles fan, and she's like lives and breathes Philly sports. Yeah. So I totally feel that. Like I mean, I'm like mostly NFL, but she also is, but she will just watch basketball just for the Sixers, and she'll just watch, certain sports just for the Flyers or the Phillies. So
it's so ingrained in you. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally feel that. I feel like Philadelphia is probably one of the most die hard sports cities, because like there's always there's New York is pretty hard with the Yankees and the Giants and even the Jets. They're pretty loyal fans there, but
those poor Jets fans.
I used to work in
Jets fans.
They exist, and they are die hard. Like they will never falter.
You gotta tip your cap to a Jets fan because they've been through it, man.
My dad is a Jets fan, so he has lived through it since the 70s. So he totally feels it. But yeah, I feel like I used to work in South Jersey, and everyone down there is Eagles fans and Philly fans. I have never felt like I was like, wow, these people like will die for their teams.
Yeah, it's everything, and that's how it's always felt. And I don't think you made such a good point. I don't think I realized how intense it was until like I moved away. I went to Maryland, and Maryland considers themselves the South. I'm like, I don't know, guys, you're like 2 hours away. So but that's a whole nother thing. But they're very much into like college sports, and are like. And I think if you're from like the New York, New Jersey area, like college sports, we pay attention to. Like, I didn't go to Temple, but I'll always root for them. I'll always root for Nova. Like, you pay attention to them unless you went to Penn State. Like, it really wasn't a big college football town. And I realized, I'm like, why are we paying more attention to college sports? Like, it was so bizarre to me. But yeah, it wasn't until I went to college and I lived like in Baltimore that people were like, oh, you're one of those crazy Philly fans. I'm like, this is baseline. Yeah. I'm the most normal Philly fan you will meet. And then you meet my cousins, and it's going to be, you're going to be in for a shock. And I kind of love being part of that crazy group, because it's that whole mentality of, I don't need you to understand me. I know you don't understand me. And I'm okay with that. Oh, I can't hear you.
I think I just muted my mic. Can you hear me? Okay. So basically up here, you're completely right. Like we follow some college sports. Like I mostly like watch college football, if anything, and that's all the Southern teams. Mm-hmm. I mean, the closest one is like Syracuse, and
unless you went nearby. There, you're like I'll watch, or if there's like a local team on, like if Temple makes a run or something, I'm like, yeah, go Owls. But like, I don't know. It's just such a different vibe. Yeah.
Very different. Very different. I just spoke to some people last week that are from Texas, and they like, one of the guys was all in on all Texas college football, like and high school football too. Like it gets intense. High school is
like intense down there.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, I just kind of root for whoever college football thing. And honestly, I don't even pay attention to it really unless it's like draft time. And then I'm like, okay, I remember seeing some of these guys throughout the season. Now I'm like, okay, this guy played for Clemson or whatever. But it is a very different kind of dynamic, and it's
for sure.
It's very interesting, and even by state, it's all very, very crazy. But the last thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about today was sort of some advice to send out to not only girls or women, but boys, men, anybody that's thinking about getting into the sports industry. What kind of advice would you give them to like kind of push them in the direction that they want to go?
I think you should be really clear about what you want and what you like to do. I know in the beginning, everyone says, say yes to everything. And that's true. Like if someone offers you an opportunity, maybe it doesn't pay a ton. I hate that, like I have to say that, like, but the reality is it might not pay a ton at first. And, I had other jobs to help me, stay afloat when I did take those jobs for $50 or $25, but it cost me $30 in gas to get there. Like it can be difficult. But I would say at a certain point, you should get pretty clear about what you want to do. Because if you keep saying yes to everything, or you become just open to anything, I noticed that's when I didn't get any jobs, because I was kind of, putting my pot in so many different fires. But when I really concentrated on what do I really like to do? What do I really like to cover? What am I really passionate about? That's when I saw a lot of progress of getting more reps, getting more work. And the thing is too, is like, you can't replace any type of experience than reps. And even if you can't, I know the struggle of not being able to find a job after college. I applied to 200. I didn't hear back from one. Except Fargo, North Dakota, and they didn't want me. I'm like, well, thanks for letting me know. like just don't respond like everyone else. But and I was ready to pick up and move to Fargo, and it wasn't my journey. So I think it's hard when you keep getting no's or you keep getting ignored. But just know, like, there's so many ways to get reps. Starting a podcast is a great way to get reps. Even just, I used to do this all the time. I would film myself. I would write a stand-up, like I would follow the news. Okay, what's important right now? Mm-hmm. I would pretend to do a stand-up, because then you can at least watch it back and be like, oh wow, I'm terrible. I need to work on this. And the only way you're going to get more comfortable and better is just by doing reps. And I think there's so many. The digital side of everything is a great way to get involved on anything. It can be a grind, it can be tough, but that's because it's worth it, when you get to what you want.
Absolutely. That's great. And I've I'm someone who's trying to get into the mix more, kind of, get myself out there more. And I've, been following just those things, starting a podcast, putting myself out there, and after I graduated from college, the same things. I was applying to jobs left and right, and just there was nothing. There was nothing. And it's like, you feel like you're like, oh my God, like I did all this stuff in college and now it's not even worth anymore. But I definitely, it's on the move. It's on the move. And for everyone else too, like I definitely recommend starting a podcast, especially if you like to talk like we do.
Great.
I literally have a degree in talking, so it's what I do best.
And too, it's just like, I know it's hard because I did this so much, and you're always still guilty of it, but not to play the comparison game. Mm-hmm. And not to scroll through Instagram and wonder how'd they get that job, or wow, they're so far along. It's like, listen, like no one's progress is linear. Like at one point I really thought like, oh, this is it. And what I thought was it ended up bringing me down 2 steps. And then, you just always have to be moving forward and never think that it's going to be completely linear. And be ready, because like some days it's going to suck and some days you're going to lose faith in yourself, but then you always have to remind yourself why you're doing it. I always ask myself, well, what else would you do? I'm like, oh God, I don't think I'm good at anything else, there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. And I think if you can always hold on to that, you'll always find a way to push.
Absolutely. Marisa, thank you so much for coming on this week and talking to me. Tell everyone where they can find your podcast and like your social medias and stuff like that.
Sure. You can find my podcast, Pilla Talk, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's a lot of pictures of my dog. I don't know if you're interested. It's Marisa_Pilla, and then Pilla Talk on Twitter.
Awesome. All right, everyone. I want to thank everyone for listening this week. We had a great interview with Marisa. That was fantastic. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at TGWTS Podcast, on Instagram and TikTok at The Girl Who Talks Sports. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and on all podcasting platforms. And I hope you all have a fun, fantastic, sports-filled day. And I will see you guys all next week. Bye.